on this point. Shortly after, one of the gentlemen civilly led me to my carriage, and so it was. As we were returning home, some soldiers rode up and stopped the carriage, desiring the coachman to take to the other side of the aqueduct, to avoid the body of a man who had just been murdered within a few doors of our house. In the convent of the Encarnación I saw another girl sacrificed in a similar manner. She was received there without a dowry on account of the exceeding fineness of her voice. She little thought what a fatal gift it would prove to her. The most cruel part of all was, that wishing to display her fine voice to the public, they made her sing a hymn alone, on her knees, her arms extended in the form of a cross before all the immense crowd, Ancilla Christi sum, the bird of Christ I am. She was a good looking girl, fat and comely, who would probably have led a comfortable life in the world, for which she seemed well fitted, most likely without one touch of romance or enthusiasm in her composition, but having the unfortunate honour of being niece to two Cañones, she was thus honourably provided for, without expense, in her 19th year. As might be expected, her voice faltered, and instead of singing, she seemed inclined to cry out. Each note came slowly, heavily, tremblingly, and at last she nearly fell forward exhausted, when two of the sisters caught and supported her. I had almost made up my mind to see no more such scenes, which, unlike pulque and bullfights, I dislike more and more upon trial, when we received an invitation, which it was not easy to refuse, but was the more painful to accept, being acquainted, though slightly, with the victim. I send you the printed note of invitation. On Wednesday, the of this month, at 6 o'clock in the evening, my daughter, Doña María de la Concepción, P.E., will assume the habit of a nun of the choir and the black veil in the convent of Our Lady of the Encarnación. I have the honour to inform you of this, entreating you to cooperate with your presence in the solemnity of this act, a favour which will be highly esteemed by your affectionate servant who kisses your hand. María José de Mexico, June 1840. Having gone out in the carriage to pay some visits, I suddenly recollected that it was the very morning of the day in which this young girl was to take the veil, and also that it was necessary to inquire where I was to be placed, for as to entering the church with the crowd on one of these occasions, it is out of the question, particularly when the girl being, as in the present case, of distinguished family, the ceremony is expected to be peculiarly magnificent. I accordingly called at the house, was shown upstairs, and, to my horror, found myself in the midst of a goodly company, in rich array, consisting of the relations of the family, to the number of about 100 persons, the bishop himself in his purple robes and amethysts, a number of priests, the father of the young lady in his general's uniform, she herself in purple velvet, with diamonds and pearls, and a crown of flowers. The corsage of her gown entirely covered with little bows of ribbon of divers colours, which her friends had given her, each adding one, like stones thrown on a cairn in memory of the departed. She had also short sleeves and white satin shoes. Being very handsome, with fine black eyes, good teeth, and fresh colour, and above all with the beauty of youth, for she is but 18, she was not disfigured even by this overloaded dress. Her mother, on the contrary, who was to act the part of madrina, who wore a dress facsimile, and who was pale and sad, her eyes almost extinguished with weeping, looked like a picture of misery in a ball dress. In the adjoining room long tables were laid out, on which servants were placing refreshments for the fête about to be given on this joyous occasion. I felt somewhat shocked, and inclined to say with Paul Pry, "Hope I don't intrude." But my apologies were instantly cut short, and I was welcomed with true Mexican hospitality, repeatedly thanked for my kindness in coming to see the nun, and hospitably pressed to join the family feast. I only got off upon a promise of returning at 5:30, to accompany them to the ceremony, which, in fact, I greatly preferred to going there alone. I arrived at the hour appointed, and being led upstairs by the Señor Don , found the morning party, with many additions, lingering over the dessert. There was some gaiety, but evidently forced. It reminded me of a marriage feast previous to the departure of the bride who is about to be separated from her family for the first time. Yet how different, in fact, is this banquet, where the mother and daughter met together for the last time on earth! At stated periods, indeed, the mother may hear her daughter's voice speaking to her as from the depths of the tomb, but she may never more fold her in her arms, never more share in her joys or in her sorrows, or nurse her in sickness; and when her own last hour arrives, though but a few streets divide them, she may not give her dying blessing to the child who had been for so many years the pride of her eyes and heart. I have seen no country where families are so knit together as in Mexico, where the affections are so concentrated, or where such devoted respect and obedience are shown by the married sons and daughters to their parents. In that respect they always remain as little children. I know many families of which the married branches continue to live in their father's house, forming a sort of small colony and living in the most perfect harmony. They cannot bear the idea of being separated, and nothing but dire necessity ever forces them to leave their fatherland. To all the accounts which travellers give them of the pleasures to be met with in the European capitals, they turn a deaf ear. Their families are in Mexico, their parents and sisters and relatives, and there is no happiness for them elsewhere. The greater therefore is the sacrifice which those parents make, who, from religious motives, devote their daughters to a conventual life. , however, was furious at the whole affair, which he said was entirely against the mother's consent, though that of the father had been obtained, and pointed out to me the confessor whose influence had brought it about. The girl herself was now very pale, but evidently resolved to conceal her agitation, and the mother seemed as if she could shed no more tears, quite exhausted with weeping. As the hour for the ceremony drew near, the whole party became more grave and sad, all but the priests, who were smiling and talking together in groups. The girl was not still a moment. She kept walking hastily through the house, taking leave of the servants, and naming probably her last wishes about everything. She was followed by her younger sisters, all in tears. But it struck 6, and the priests intimated that it was time to move. She and her mother went downstairs alone, and entered the carriage which was to drive them through all the principal streets, to show the nun to the public according to custom, and to let them take their last look, they of her and she of them. As they got in, we all crowded to the balconies to see her take leave of her house, her aunt saying, "Yes, child, despedete de tu casa, take leave of your house, for you will never see it again." Then came sobs from the sisters, and many of the gentlemen, ashamed of their emotion, hastily quitted the room. I hope, for the sake of humanity, I did not rightly interpret the look of constrained anguish which the poor girl threw from the window of the carriage at the home of her childhood. They drove off, and the relations prepared to walk in procession to the church. I walked with the Count S o, the others followed in pairs. The church was very brilliantly illuminated, and as we entered, the band was playing one of Strauss's waltzes. The crowd was so tremendous that we were nearly squeezed to a jelly in getting to our places. I was carried off my feet between two fat señoras in mantillas and shaking diamond pendants, exactly as if I had been packed between two movable feather beds. They gave me, however, an excellent place, quite close to the grating, beside the Countess de S o, that is to say, a place to kneel on. A great bustle and much preparation seemed to be going on within the convent, and veiled figures were flitting about, whispering, arranging, etc. Sometimes a skinny old dame would come close to the grating, and lifting up her veil, bestow upon the pensive public a generous view of a very haughty and very wrinkled visage of some 70 years' standing, and beckon into the church for the major domo of the convent, an excellent and profitable situation, by the way, or for padre this or that. Some of the holy ladies recognized and spoke to me through the grating. But at the discharge of fireworks outside the church the curtain was dropped, for this was a signal that the nun and her mother had arrived. An opening was made in the crowd as they passed into the church, and the girl kneeling down was questioned by the bishop, but I could not make out their dialogue, which was carried on in a low voice. She then passed into the convent by a side door, and her mother, quite exhausted and nearly in hysterics, was supported through the crowd to a place beside us in front of the grating.